Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we bring you another special, a conversation between Alexey Arestovych, advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel, and Yulia Latynina, Russian investigative journalist in exile. That conversation happened on day 180 of this war, so without further ado, enjoy. Hello. I'll start with the usual and the sacred. Please do not forget to subscribe, share, and click the like button to Yulia's channel, to Alexey's channel, and to the Privateer Station, of course, if you are listening or watching that in English. Alright, Alexey, let's start with the usual situation on the front. Well, it is ambivalent over there. And the ambivalence is that there is nothing happening on the strategic level, but a lot of tactical motions. And namely, attempts to surround Avdiivka, to surround Bakhmut from the south, and to repel Ukrainian offensive, which happened earlier on the part, the northeastern part, near Kremenная Svatova. Under Bakhmut, there are layers upon layers of Wagner troops, mostly those mobilized inmates. Russian side in that area is doing offensive work, and we are also working on some counteroffensive maneuvers around that. Additional troops are coming to the Eastern Front from Kherson. I'm generally looking with some optimism at what is happening near Bakhmut, and I expect all of us to have some good surprises. What else? What else besides Bakhmut? Well, Avdiivka will not be surrounded. Svatov and Kremenная counter-offensive on their side will not really work. And I expect all of us to have a few good surprises to celebrate closer to New Year. Speaking of these surprises, is it offensive towards Melitopol or straight directly to Crimea? Well, Yulia, if I knew, I would not be able to share that, but I don't even know, so... Alright, I'm just looking at the map. Right. If there are some moves are obvious, it doesn't mean the representative of President's office should be talking about them during the actions. During warfare, it is not too bright from me to be going into these things. I unfortunately or fortunately have a floor of official person, so I cannot discuss some obvious elements. You can discuss them with private commentators. Right. Dear viewers, we shall discuss with Roman Svitan and some other experts these elements tomorrow and the day after. So let's talk about other items then with Alexey. For example, Bakhmut. For the last couple of weeks, there were reports that there was just a full grinder out there, and I even suspected that perhaps they were being thrown there on purpose to just get rid of all of them. Well, Yulia, it's a little more complicated with Wagner. They do have core of specialists, the ones who actually support these fights. And then there is a lot of meat infantry, people whom they mobilize from prisons, etc. And their general philosophy is that they send this infantry over forward and they die there in droves. But all the professionals, the ones who manage the UAVs, artillerists, specialists, tankers, they are being used much more sparsely, much more carefully, so they have a much higher chance of surviving. But infantry, yeah, this is probably already 8 layers of them near Bakhmut, not even 5. So, a very technical thing that Roman Svitan, another expert on my channel, mentioned, and I thought that I was wrong. So, he mentioned that these attacks, these blatant attacks that they were trying to capture whatever they could in the last few weeks, The reason behind these attacks was that Wagner troops understood that Ukrainians' reinforcements would arrive from down at Kherson, and they had that window of time to capture something. How would you address that hypothesis? This is exactly right. They were trying to enter the city, so we would have to be waging city warfare with them, and this is always a more slow, a more bloody endeavor. And they were making those futile attempts to continue trying to push to Bakhmut until we get resupply reinforcements. But they failed, they ran out of time. Yesterday at Mark Svagin's stream, you talked about Ukrainian tankists near Kherson and how well they would be formed and how well they shoot, but I also have to comment on that, by the way, a lot of tanks are dug in, so imagine when they'll be able to start moving around without being just stationary targets. And the other question related to that Russian Lancets were shooting at them pretty effectively when they were stationary. So how would you comment on that? Well, they are effective. They're rather effective. Like every UAV with a camera and the one that can be somewhat precise, yeah, they can be effective. To our luck, that their Lancets do not carry too much of an explosive, so they can't really destroy reliably units such as tank, but they can definitely damage. They can definitely damage and cause vehicle to go to repairs after that. And in any case, UAVs are pretty effective weapon. So how do you guys fight them? Ideally, we would prefer them not to even get into the sky, so if you can cover their position before they take wing. But alternatively, yeah, you need to use air defense systems. Military structures, they work together, they work in conjunction, so not a single branch of military can successfully defend on its own. If you want higher effectivity, you need to integrate them. So it's a joint work. So those people who manage to create that linkage between different kinds of troops, they succeed. The ones who fail, they do not. Ukrainian commanders are just like any other commander. So in some cases, they are successful. They integrate their efforts together, artillery, infantry, air defense. And in other cases, they don't have enough time because, like every experience, you need to live through that, figure out what attacked you, get enough time to figure out countermeasures, and for that you need effort, will, smarts. Some commanders succeed in doing that, some commanders do not. All right, that was Yulia Latynina and Alexey Arestovych. We have about 10,000 of you watching us live. Do not forget to subscribe and share and click the like button, and do the same with Privateer Station, the channel that is bringing you that in English. Now we're not going too deep into possibilities, what may happen after the mud will dry a little bit and get frosted over. We should mention that a lot of equipment that was stationed earlier and prepared for Kherson offensive was not used there, so very likely it will be used on the eastern front. But let's also talk about another thing. There are some insiders that are on the Russian side. They're talking about some hellish perspectives that Putin is going to start some offensive from Belarus, and he might start it on the 23rd of February, or may not even do that. And I have a hypothesis here that they are not being lied to, that these commentators are actually commenting the real news that happened. I think Putin is being lied to by his military leaders, by his military commanders, and that is being just translated downwards, downstream. Yulia, I told you earlier that you have an interesting feature. You very precisely point out certain things. I value your ideation. So I want to say that military do lie to Putin. Yes, in my estimation, they definitely have to. And I have to give you a compliment that you're one of the smarter commentators on the whole topic. Alexey, no. You're the smartest man in the room. If you bring that ever again, I will point back at you just like that. So, okay. Let's then rephrase that. What I like about you is that you are an investigative journalist and you can investigate. Whenever you take a topic, you have a tendency to dig all the way down. So, military, indeed, we have noticed on numerous occasions they are bringing falsehoods to Putin, yes. And in Belarus, they're training a lot of troops, but they're training them to throw them down near Kremenaya into the fight and into Donbass. So Belarus has a very successful, has a very well-established training facilities for military, and they're just training them to throw them down south. Belarus does not show any signs of creating any military group, any possible offensive group for the northern operation, not even a sign. So there is just training facility, but every 2 days or every day recently, a lot of noteworthy bloggers, politicians, commentators talk about the possibility of Russia bringing down up to 170,000 troops from Belarus onto the northern border of Ukraine. And why? Where does that 170 come from? Well, I don't know. I never really understood people who are lying like that, why they're modest. Just should have said they'll bring 5 million and 2 flying saucers, and also those Nazi battalions from somewhere in Antarctic. And a couple archangels from the sky. Exactly. So people who comment on that possible operation, they prefer to not comment on the quantities and numbers on the front. They don't know where the numbers will come from. And Belarus is not a topic right now. Even if right now they make a decision on a federal level to start offensive operation from Belarus and will undertake immediate titanic measures to do that, to carry it out, they will need, attention, 2 to 3 months to create that group. 23rd of February, maybe somewhat possible if they would start gathering and preparing immediately. But there's not even a hint in Belarus about creating that group. I think there is not even a will to create a group in Belarus. Also, Putin, who is looking so much for negotiations, how can he present Belarus to the West, to Turks who are helping him in negotiation efforts? How would he frame that? I do want to have peace talk so much that I started another offensive from a third country? The answer would be, are you nuts? How can we talk negotiations when you are escalating, when you are bringing another country, bordering NATO countries into the fight, when everything was sort of going quieter, moving towards Donbass? And again, what will he tell to Russian people? If, for example, they only capture a little bit in Donetsk and Lugansk and save Crimea, they can still sell that all that effort was to destroy a NATO group, so operation in Kiev, Kherson and Zaporozhye was only to distract and to destroy NATO troops that were being aggregated in Ukraine, and now we're going back to our usual borders and defending Donetsk and Lugansk republics, and we don't care about any other. But we use that as a special operation. So, to prevent a possible threat. That's how you sell. But how do you sell Belarus invasion? Another attempt to capture Kiev? Even his secretary, Peskov, probably doesn't believe that, and the last housewives in Kamchatka and their cats probably would also laugh at Putin if he states that. So, Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, I somewhat get that. They will try to prevent us from going down to Crimea. They'll try, but they'll fail. If he opens another side, if he opens the Belarus front, he escalates on the world theater again. Everybody will bring up Bucha pictures and all these things that happened in the previous invasion. And it will be very difficult to those who support Putin to push that Ukraine does not need more weapons. They'll have a much harder task of selling that if Putin escalates. And that work, by the way, is being carried daily. There are Putin's proponents around the world that are pushing for Ukraine to stop receiving more armaments. But thankfully, the West is still with us, and after the NATO meeting, they did talk that they're continuing to support Ukraine, and their stance has not changed. But sooner or later, there'll be another push for another round of negotiations, and any operation happening in the north would not help these propositions to negotiate at all. Okay, another topic from Ursula von der Leyen's speech. There was a piece cut out about the numbers of losses, where she said that about 20,000 peaceful citizens were killed as a result of that operation, that war, and about 100,000 military troops. So she was mistaken. When you do a lot of public speeches, you once in a while make a mistake. She said about 100,000 killed in action, Ukrainian soldiers. This is an absolutely unrealistic number. It is 10 times bigger than real. General Milley was the first one who mentioned that number, but he used a different descriptor. He said killed and wounded. Remember a different statement by General Zaluzhny. He said about 10,000 dead. That did not change. It changed a little bit, but not drastically. And now you can give a hint that Ukrainian losses to Russian losses are about 1 to 7. And Russian losses are about 100,000? No, 80. If you count just military. If you add private mercenary corps and mobilized, then probably over 100,000. So we can speak about Ukrainian losses a little bit over 10,000 in killed in action. We have tens of thousands wounded, but our statistics is that 96% of them are coming back to fight, unlike Russia, where so we have a correlation between dead and wounded is about 1 to 7, and in Russia they have very atypical correlation between dead and wounded. It's probably 1 to 1, 1 to 1.5. Most of their wounded die before they reach any hospital. The ones that do get there, they likely never come back. Most of them do not come back. The war is a very rough thing. You know, if you got a heavy wounded person in 40 minutes without help, he's dead. If you got a medium level wound in 40 minutes, they become heavy. If you get a light one, unless it's a really, really light one, in 40 minutes they become a medium. So unless there is help provided, a lot of them will not come back. So yeah, that's their side. Commenting Ursula's statement, we have slightly over 10,000 killed in action, and that's altogether, not just military, all branches of defense. All right, I don't know detailed Ukrainian losses, but I can say that I can confirm that many times when you speak on the mic, you can make mistakes. And I made this mistake also, combining the losses together. Yeah, let's dive deeper a little bit. So, there are different kinds of losses. There are the ones that are returnable to the front and the ones that never will come back. The ones that don't, they are the ones who killed in action or got prisoners of war. The ones that can be returned to the front are the wounded and... Okay, there are two categories, sanitary and some others, but let's not go into that specifics. So sanitary losses, that's Soviet system. When the serviceman left his detachment for over 24 hours. So he could have gone for 26 hours, get some aid, and then come back. But for the day when he was gone, he's considered to be a sanitary loss for the day and adds to the totals of the war. So many non-professionals, and Ursula von der Leyen obviously does not have to be a specialist in the Soviet way of calculating casualties. So she could have calculated that or considered that to be a total loss. Or perhaps just made a slip of a tongue, right? Because that overall 100,000 number includes not just killed in action, but also wounded, the ones that came back, even the ones who got a flu and came back. And killed in action number that actually has the number of all the branches of our defense. I would have never spilled that, but since the Eurocommission representative brought the wrong number, we had to correct that, and Zaluzhny came out, and President and others. So, yeah, there is no sensation here. She took her words back and corrected that, but Russian propagandists, they would always be peddling that and playing conspiracy theories. We gave our answer. So, speaking of Russian losses, we have never discussed here soldiers' protests, because all these mobilized who are talking that they have nothing to wear, that they're not being trained. I did not think these protests are serious. That's why I've never brought them up. But yesterday, and just shortly before the stream, Vladimir Asechkin mentioned that Wagner fighters who are returning, who are done with their contract, coming back to Russia, to Petersburg from under Bakhmut, they're going to retire. Most of them do not want to return back to the front. So that becomes somewhat serious. And I'm bringing Roman Svitan again, my other expert. According to his data, he mentioned that the scale of Russians leaving the front, deserting the front, is so big in Zaporozhye that they're actually using helicopters to track down the runaways. If that is so serious, let's maybe talk about that. What can you say if that is true? Yeah, let's do that. So, avoiding the military service or deserting is very well established, not just between mobilized, but also between the cadre military. We've been noticing that. Same thing on the Eastern Front with Bakhmut and ex-cons. There is a lot of rumors that they're being executed if they refuse to go to fight. Mostly they're just being beaten up a little, unless they actually left and ran away. So, speaking of Zaporozhye, Russian command does not control situation that well as Lugansk and Donetsk. So over there, mobilized are in pretty difficult conditions. On one hand, it's a naked steppe. It's a pretty bad proposition in winter. You know, if you're fighting in the city, in the urban landscape, you can at least warm yourself in some of the buildings. In Donbass, they're also being very well controlled and sent to die on the front, so they can't really run. But in Zaporozhye, it's somewhat of a lull. There is still an aviation and artillery fighting, which doesn't help their morale at all. And when you don't see the enemy and just get smashed with artillery, that usually brings your morale down. That's not like contact fighting. So, in any case, that creates definitely situations where people go to the store, get more vodka, never come back, they disappear during the night hours. I'm not sure about helicopters being used, I haven't seen those confirmations, but their morale indeed is pretty low. More or less, they're okay near Melitopol, but that's a higher concentration of the troops and better defense of that area. But out somewhere in the field, no, there's, yeah. And they do understand that you can use the best specialists of the Royal Academy of Engineers to build the defense area, build it up. You still will be pretty low in morale in that situation. And there is nothing to base your defense structure on in that area. It's naked steppe, really. So it doesn't help their morale at all. And I think they do also understand where the possible offensive maneuver can happen, right? So they're somewhat scared expecting it. Well, Yulia, I cannot confirm that possibility of the strike in that direction, but speaking of that Eastern Front, let's say somewhere between Kremenna and Svatova, somewhere in the middle there. I would not name exact settlements, but they did send some troops, some mobilized in that area. And whenever the action started, they ran so far that they had to catch them tens of miles further east. So, and when interviewed, they said, well, you know, we were placed in the middle. We have never seen the enemy. We were immediately shelled by friendly fire. And then when there was a big attack to the flank of us and their commander got killed, the whole battalion just took off and ran. And they stopped it miles away. So I always want to address people who count missiles, who count the correlation of power, armaments, and mobilized versus soldiers, cadre. It shows that people who talk like that, they have not fought themselves, or have not read Napoleon, who said morale equates to other means of fighting as 3 to 1. Or they have not read Tolstoy, who also wrote that military win the fights by unrecognizable fiat of spirit. Yeah, the people who talk just about numbers, they don't know what is battle-worthiness is. It is like pants that are trying to fall. And the pants that are not just trying to fall, but also to run away from you as far as you can, as far as they can. So you always have to try to pull them up and keep them up somewhere closer to the belly button. Because the moment you stop, they fall down. First of all, not every commander knows how to keep morale higher. Secondary, many commanders do not have a chance to work on that. And civilian experts who have commanded any soldiers many, many years ago, if they have been in a commanding position at all, they do often forget about the factor of morale. It is not an analytical category that you can easily quantify, but it has a very significant importance in that calculation. So, for example, in Kharkiv operation, our offensive was not in our favor. We had lesser troops than attacking than they defending. The fairy tales about them not having cadre, not having special forces, that's all lies. 11th Corps from Kaliningrad, who used to be the most battle-worthy, right? Second or first army, I'm forgetting the number, but there were a lot of cadre detachments there. Each of them got hit, and in 4 days, each of them ran so far that we had a hole in the front, 100 by 100 kilometers. And there were pretty cadre soldiers running because of the morale. Because if you just look at the correlation, they could have still been fighting there and holding those positions. We've been operating in smaller numbers. So those people who calculate just by numbers, just by the number of weapons, do not forget about that. Do not forget about morale. Because despite of all mobilized, despite of all the hits on the civilian infrastructure, despite of all the speeches of Putin's propagandists, the overall toppling may happen much faster, because Russian soldier has nothing to fight for in Ukraine. He does not understand why does he have to create, why does he have to perform that sort of maneuver. These conversations that Moscow is behind us and the West will attack Russia, you know, these speeches do not work in trenches somewhere under Tokmak. He understands that it's about 700 kilometers to Russia from that place. And if you're defending Russia, perhaps he should be defending it somewhere on the Russian border. And why he is defending a piece of Ukrainian steppe, he has no idea. And there would never be any political propagandists in the military who can explain him why, to the level that he would get inspired and would go voluntarily die out in the field. You know, people who had never risen from a trench to the machine gun fire, or just any fire, didn't try to get out of the trench, will never understand people who have done it. Professionals and some brighter individuals can, of course, extrapolate, but there are not too many of them on this planet. Soldier has to have a very strong motive behind his ideation to walk across the minefield, to sit in an iron box and get smashed with an anti-tank missile, because you won't even see that missile, you'll just be dispersed in molecules. It's scary to fight, it's very scary to be at war. And the soldier who fights, he overcomes that fear daily. When a Ukrainian soldier understands that his 4-year-old daughter will be raped and killed if he will not be fighting, he understands what he is fighting for, what he is risking for. But when Russian soldier is facing a Ukrainian 700 miles away from the border of Russia, or 300 miles, or even 5 miles, doesn't matter. What is he doing there? Is his house being threatened? No. Is his daughter being threatened? No. Evil Ukrainians will come and kill his wife and his livestock in the yard? No. Ukrainians understand what we fight for. Russians do not. So, however you calculate the mobilized numbers, however you count the trenches they dig across Crimea Peninsula, and however you threaten to the South Central, it doesn't matter. Because these propagandists are not talking about the most important thing. They're wasting what? They're wasting material resources of Russia? They already are. They already are wasted to a big degree. They wanted to mobilize 300,000. They barely got 240. And we already are finding dead bodies in Iranian uniforms or Belarus uniforms. I haven't seen the North Koreans yet. The other depletion is morale depletion. Depletion of morality, moral factor. That's a big factor in each war. One thing when you're in Solovyov studio and propagandist in Moscow and you're threatening your fist at Kiev, that's one. And another when you're sitting in a trench and you're being shelled by HIMARS, by Ukrainian artillery, and you're facing Ukrainian soldiers who remember Bucha, who remember Holodomor, and who remember all those grievances from the last 400 years when the empire tried to kill and destroy more of Ukraine. That soldier in the trench understands that he doesn't care really about the morale and motivation. He wants to survive, and to paint that picture brighter, they're actually in higher precision, I should say. They actually do not even have enough food. They're being supplied only to 7.75 of the norm that they should be supplied. So when you're hungry, when you don't know what you're doing in the trench, when you're risking your life and it's always hanging by a thread, just a warning that this front may topple, and it may topple real fast that people will not even expect it to topple and run. Thank you, Alexey. Thank you for commenting on that. That was a good speech. Okay, let's take a look at another person whose life probably depends upon this war, and I want to talk about Prigozhin. Okay, Zaluzhny, as we were talking, I don't know if he was listening to us. Valery Fedorovich just posted a picture. He posted a photo of a child and said, yes, for the kids. We all understand what we're fighting for. It is our children. Nothing threatens Russian children in case of Ukrainian victory. Ukrainian children will probably face death, and death will likely be the easiest way out, because many of Ukrainian kids went through much more horrible things. Do you know, in the graves near Izum, and there are two more which we're still digging because they're covered with mines. Out of 401 of them, there are about 19 adult males. The rest are women, children, and elderly. And how did they die? They were executed. Tortured to death. In Kherson, they found 93 bodies with the traces of torture, and that's in the center of the city, in the central building of the National Police. Imagine what's on the periphery. Yesterday we found one family in one of the villages, 8 members of a family executed with hands tied behind their back. These things are happening daily. Every Ukrainian soldier knows that this is happening daily. Every Ukrainian soldier knows that Bucha is not just an event that happened there. It's ongoing daily. Imagine what are we fighting for, and how much hate do we have for these invaders, and what is the titanic effort we're making to not spiral down into being evil ourselves and starting executing everybody left and right. So that shows a strength of character, not only because we fight brilliantly, but we also are restraining ourselves. Oh yeah, I think Putin really would want you to not restrain yourself, because that would be definitely a factor for him to negotiate. Yeah, no, we are remaining a European army, regardless of how difficult it is, but our motivation is through the roof compared to Russian motivation. Yes, sorry. Let's continue. Okay, so I'm talking about a man who has some motivation because he bet everything on this war, and from the result of it, his status depends gravely. It is Prigozhin. So other experts are saying that, as I said, the Sechkin is bringing up that Wagner troops, many of them are refusing to continue their contracts. And his position, Prigozhin's position is somewhat wobbly at the moment, even though people are saying that criminal ex-con video about Prigozhin is a fake, but I do want to elaborate further. That sledgehammer that he used is also symbolic in a way, because there is a saying, you know, who came to our land with a sword will die from the sword. No, nobody had said whoever came with a sledgehammer to our land. Right. Sword is a sign of chivalry, a sign of knighthood. I can even say that the sword appears only about 1200 BC as a regular weapon. Until then, they were mostly clubs and sort of hammer-like weapons, bludgeoning weapons. So what does it tell? I'm probably turning to your psychologist side here. When a person chooses as his symbol not even Bayraktar, not even a sword, but a sledgehammer, and can a sledgehammer win over a HIMARS? Russia is infected with criminal culture, and it pervaded all layers of society. And criminal worldview, criminal structures are being replicated throughout the Russian administration as well, through that mafia that runs the country. And it pervades from Russian rap, from culture of the local towns to even the office of the president of Russia, and I'm not even talking about his enforcement agencies. And Prigozhin started to build a myth on that basically says that Wagner and all its networks are a cold, horrible force that can make even other Russian enforcement agencies shiver. And here are the videos. Here's the video from Syria where another prisoner of war was sledgehammered to death and then cut with a chainsaw. And here there is another one with a guy being executed with a sledgehammer. And then there are mythology about them sending that bloody sledgehammer to your parliament. All right, that's a fake too. Exactly, but whatever is being thrown into the information field, myth does not have to match the exact order of events happening. Myth has to match the design, what is it there for. So all these things pervading the information field, they are targeting only Russian audience. Even if it happened and your parliament would have gotten a bloody sledgehammer, they wouldn't really care. That wouldn't scare them. They would probably send more help to Ukraine and aid them to highlight whom they were fighting with. And this is for the most part targeting Russian internal audience. And that's his internal run to the top of power was actually pretty effectively stopped with that criminal video. With that another inmate, ex-con, talking about his sexual relations with Prigozhin. But the West doesn't really care about what happened there when Prigozhin was in prison. Ukraine too, we don't care about his past. But in Russian culture, that matters. And yeah, they have to question, how can we shake his hand? How can we sit at the table with him? And how can you have a person with such a biography on the higher levels of Russian administration? You shouldn't even be here with them. So that indicates a very tight infighting under Putin. That fight of bulldogs under the carpet is really bad. This is an opportunity for one side to take over another. And it is an important signal for the whole world, including us as well, that Russian elites are approaching the dark times and the crackling. So at some point it will start spilling out in the street. Let's change the topic. There was a NATO summit yesterday and you said a lot of good words about that. But did NATO supply enough good weapons? New nomenclature? Because I heard that they're coming back to Polish MiGs. Maybe they'll outfit them with some good NATO missiles. And I saw Boeing suggested supplying missiles that fly for 150 kilometers. I'll tell one thing that's scary for Prigozhin and his comrades. Some time ago, I got a feeling, it's a subjective feeling, but I would voice it here, that the West stopped really taking care about Moscow screams. They understood where Moscow is strategically after the eventualities of this war, what brought us to this point. And immediately after that, we started seeing notes about brimstones with laser targeting, about the special ammo flying for 150, about more air defense systems and Patriot systems perhaps being sent, even though states are not giving Patriots yet. But you understand that today they're kind of discussing that. A year ago, they wouldn't even give us stingers easily. So eventually, they'll give us everything we need to fight that foe. So my only question to the West is, why are you so slow walking that? Let's just give it all right now and we'll figure it out. But as I see it, they stopped considering such a thing as a red line from the Kremlin's point of view. They're disregarding those Kremlin's red lines. And that information that was thrown into the media at the beginning of war, that United States are not giving anything in terms of jet fighters and China is not supporting that war on the Russian side, the main part of that was that there was some agreement between these superpowers of the world. But right now I'm seeing that the United States is not really caring much about the nomenclature. Even Stoltenberg is saying that they're increasing what they're supplying. So I'm thinking sooner or later we'll have all the necessary means to win that war. By the way, speaking of signals, can you resolve an issue of Russian strategic bombers, those bases where they're based, those airfields they fly from? Is there a way for you to reach them? Can you resolve that? We do have a problem of symmetry. We can reach probably 100 miles deep, they can reach 2,000 miles deep. So it is very difficult to conduct a war on this parity. But if you get supplied with that, well, I think Russian command, when they start seeing that the missile can actually get to their airfield where their strategic bombers are based, they would probably think twice or thrice before using them, facing a risk of retaliation. And the West actually is facing a dilemma that we talked about, that they cannot let Ukraine lose, and at the same time they are not trying to cause Ukraine to win rapidly over Russia in fear of deterioration of the latter. So they also have to react to all these atrocities Russian troops are creating on the front, and the shellings of the energy systems and genocide essentially of people. So they need to figure ways out to somehow help us to prevent Russia from hitting civilian targets. And as some of the spokesperson recently started voicing more and more, that in order to preclude these attacks from the Russia onto Ukrainian infrastructure, Ukraine must have a capability to retaliate back. And some of the NATO countries are already asking a question, why are they not even allowed to hit Russian territory? Russia invaded them. Why do they not fight back? Why do they limit their response to just Ukrainian territory? And this discussion is ongoing. This is a very good sign that slowly but gradually they will get to the right decision. You know, like Churchill spoke about Americans will make the right decision after they have tried everything else. So speaking about Russian rocket bases, Russian strategic bombers, Pavel Luzin, Russian expert, mentioned that it's impossible to win that war without posing a threat to their bases. Yulia, we can win this war even without attacking those military bases, but with a capability to target those bases, it will be a much faster and much smoother win, and much less casualties. Another question. I was recently talking to a historian on my channel about Stalin's terror during the Second World War. I knew of some things, for example, Soviet partisans were prepared agents who actually took people from families in the villages to the forest, threatening to kill their relatives. And some parts of those partisans at the beginning of war just surrendered to Germans, didn't even want to fight them. I did not know that on the east of Ukraine, a lot of those partisans were locals. Obviously, out of 100, probably a very small group of 5 or 10 remained. But by the end of war, that mechanism, or to the middle of war, that mechanism of terror was actually working rather successfully. And many people saw that Stalin is somewhat winning or getting ready to change the dynamics on the front. People started supporting partisans. So I was thinking that Stalin's terror was effective. And Putin, all these things that you described, mass executions, Bucha, kids being killed, all the terror is not effective for Putin. Why? Putin cannot do anything. Well, even terror campaign. We shouldn't be comparing Putin and Stalin. They're on a different scale. Stalin is an infernal entity. He's pretty much a black demon who killed thousands of people, tens of thousands. But he was talented in some of his infernality. And Putin, no. If he gives foreign passports to his agents, to Petrov and Bashirov, the guys who went to Salisbury to murder people, to poison them, if his regime gives passports to people with 1 digit off in a serial number, then that already tells you a lot about his systems and the way they do things. So they cannot do big terror. What they can do is they can do propaganda internally, just like Strugatsky's towers on that island that were zombifying its citizens. So, yeah. And also, if you look deeper in that, is it Putin? That's for the most part is the Soviet propaganda machine that they're using. And some of those experts in schools are still alive, so... But even propaganda on the larger scale, information war was won by Ukraine in 3 days after the beginning of this war. So, despite of the huge budgets, they have, what, $6 billion daily for Russian propaganda, annually for Russian propaganda, and probably $6 for Ukrainian, so me and Podolyak would have tea in our room, and of course our president, who was a banner at the beginning as the leader of nation, who was the core of that effort. And the rest is really bad, so really bad. Chechnya was mass terror, first Chechnya, second Chechen war, starting with missile strikes on the marketplaces and people and children kidnapping, until they bought Kadyrov and his clan, who's specializing in terror just as fine. The Russian machine was failing that effort. So Putin may think that's a good example. He terrorized Chechnya, and as a result he got Kadyrov, who can listen to him and who can do things, and he thinks maybe it's a good example for Ukraine. Perhaps he's looking for Kadyrov in Ukraine. Well, yeah, he got Kadyrov, but there's no mobilization, neither in Chechnya nor in the other Caucasus republics, because locals, they gave him pushback saying that no, we don't want to fight that war. And in Ukraine that doesn't fly. The only thing that can win over Ukraine is our internal victory. But it appears that in this war we learned that lesson. And that is not a threat to us anymore. And that's the main reason for Ukraine to suffer any loss. We always showed magic in the battle fighting. If you look at the historical fights where we partook, we've been winning the most unlikely battles, but we always lost later with politics and internal bickering and stuff. And right now, those people who are trying to revive that bickering, to revive internal attacks, they're being put back in place by civil society. So I'm hopeful. And we do have the will, we do have the force, we only do not have enough means, and that's on the West. They're growing, though, they're helping. And we can discuss more details. Remember about Mikhail Podolak's statement that he will go and stream from Yalta in Crimea. Returning to that, I would invite you, Yulia, to join us, and it could be you, me, Mark Fagin, and Mikhail Podolak, right, exactly, and Nizorov, and get together at the table and take a look at the sea and have a coffee there and discuss how this war was fought and what each of us did. Well, first we need to get from point A to point B, right? Then I'll ask one more question. Truly the last one. I'll change the topic. I want to change the topic here and ask you, what do you think about Musk's battle over Twitter? Well, why Pope, Musk, Peterson, Rogan are taking such a curious position about Ukraine and Putin? Because the evil of the ultra-left on the West appears to them more real than the evil of Putin, Kadyrov, and Prigozhin combined. In the eyes of the Western right, Ukraine is sort of a battle hammer being supported by European Union and Biden government, and the battle hammer of those leftists that they are resisting at home. And Putin is even sort of appearing as a conservatist in this picture, and that causes that reaction, I think. So, the business card of a lefty who is a digital person, who is a therapeutic person, who is taking all kinds of pills, and who thinks that he's always right when he is upset, and he wants to remove everything that he doesn't like from his media, from his vision, field of vision. And Musk, what he is doing, he is addressing that with the social media. Just like in Facebook, right? You know, you cannot post anything on YouTube or Facebook about sufferings of civilians. The moment you post any real video, they get deleted, they get censored. So Musk is really upset with that state of things. And he's supporting the right wing. And he's supporting that new candidates on the right side, that Florida governor, for example, that DeSantis, right, who is apparently probably going to be a good rival to Trump on the Republican side. So he bought that resource. He bought that playground, the tweeting field platform that was actually gaining more and more prominence. A lot of deals are being struck on Twitter. Remember when he got a contract about energy sources in Australia, and a lot of politicians are using Twitter for their campaigns, for their statements. Twitter is 140 digits, so you have to be somewhat eloquent, and it's sort of a must thing for a politician to know how to use Twitter. And the feature of Twitter is to be able to make a short and important statement that will cause ripples. So he took over that resource and decided to make it open, to make speech open, because he's on the side of free speech, and in that I'm on the side of Musk. I'm not on the side of Musk that he is still having issues figuring out that Putin is a threat, but Putin is not on the side of right and conservative values. But I do support his efforts with Twitter, because I'm somewhere also on the right center, and I do appreciate some conservative efforts, just like me. Thank you, Alexey. Thank you.